When you hear the word fort, what pops into your head? You're probably picturing towering stone walls, maybe a classic European castle, right? Well, today, we're going to flip that idea on its head. We're heading to the Malay archipelago, where a fort was so much more than just a wall. It was the absolute heart of a civilization.
So here's the plan. We'll start by completely redefining what a Malay fort even is. Then we'll get into how they were built, how they became part of this massive river defense system, and how the designs changed over time. And to finish it all off, we'll dive into a really fascinating historical debate that still has archaeologists scratching their heads.
All right, so to really get a handle on these incredible structures, we have to start with a single word. A word that, honestly, changes everything.
Okay, so your standard run-of-the-mill dictionary definition of a fort is super straightforward. It's a place built for defense. Simple enough.
But hold on, because in the Malay world, the word for fort is kota. And that exact same word, kota, also means city or a big town. Now, this isn't just some linguistic quirk. No, this points to a completely different philosophy of what a fortified space is even for. See, a kota wasn't some lonely military outpost stuck out of the middle of nowhere. It was the living, breathing center of a kingdom. It was your defense center, with the moats and armed guards, but it was also the administrative capital, with buildings for government and even public trials. And it was the royal residence, home to the palace and beautiful gardens. It was the whole shebang, all wrapped up in one fortified package.
So how in the world do you build one of these amazing, all-in-one super forts? Well, the answer might actually surprise you. The earliest ones relied on what was right there in nature and some seriously incredible engineering skills. We actually have this incredible first-hand account from the early 1600s. A Portuguese writer observed that Malay forts were mainly built from earth, packed down tight between wooden planks. And those outer walls, the palisades, they were made from huge timbers, like the Nabong palm, which was known for being unbelievably tough. And don't for a second think that earth and wood meant they were weak. Just look at the site of Tanah Abang in Perak. The defensive walls, these compacted earthen ramparts built way back in the 16th century, are still standing. We're talking almost 500 years later, and they are so well preserved that researchers are still studying them today.
Now, this whole tradition of building forts really went into overdrive when a huge crisis hit the region. It forced a complete rethinking of how to defend an entire kingdom.
Okay, the big turning point was the year 1511. That's when the Portuguese conquered the legendary port of Malacca. The Malay Sultanate was forced into exile, becoming the Johor Sultanate, and was suddenly under constant attack. So what did they do? Their response was nothing short of brilliant. Instead of trying to build one giant fortress, they created an entire defensive network along their main highway, the Johor River. And listen, this was no small project. The Johor Sultans built no less than 8 major forts all along that river. It was a formidable chain of defense.
This chain of 8 forts created this incredible defense-in-depth system that stretched for more than 50 miles. Think about it. Any enemy fleet trying to sail up the Johor River would have to face one fortified position after another, from the mouth of the river all the way to its source. It was a massive, strategic masterpiece.
So as you can imagine, as technology evolved, so did the forts. They started using stone and brick, and they were armed with thousands of cannons. But, and this is the really cool part, even as they modernized, Malay forts kept this very distinct design philosophy that made them totally different from their European counterparts. And this slide just says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you've got plans of several Malay forts. See the pattern? They're all pretty much squares or rectangles. Now look to the right. Those are Portuguese forts. Their shapes are all over the place, right? They're irregular, hugging the coastline and bending to every hill and curve of the landscape.
So the big question is, why? Well, European design was purely pragmatic. The shape of the land told you what shape the fort should be. Simple as that. But the Malay design was philosophical. That rectangular shape was a core tradition, a kind of modular system that was easy to manage. It was also symbolic, sometimes tied to the 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. And they used this square design everywhere, whether the fort was on a hill or on flat land.
And this brings us to our final section, and to a major historical debate. It's all about Malacca, the greatest port city of its time, and a very simple question that has no easy answer.
What were Malacca's defenses really made of before the Europeans showed up? Were they the classic earth and timber structures we've been talking about, or were they made of stone?
Okay, so there are two competing theories here. On one side, you have the earth and wood palisade theory. These folks point out that the first Portuguese accounts only ever mention timber stockades, and archaeologists still haven't found any physical proof of a stone fort from before that time. But then you have the walled stone city theory. Its supporters point to old sketches that seem to show stone walls. They argue that a city with 8,000 cannons, which Malacca reportedly had, would need stone walls to support them. Their thinking is that the Portuguese just built their famous fortress, the Formosa, right on top of the original Malay ruins.
But here's a key piece of logic that really supports the earth and wood theory. It comes from the Portuguese themselves. When they built their own stone fort, the Formosa, their own records show they couldn't find enough stone. They actually had to tear down mosques and royal tombs to get building materials. So the argument is just common sense. If a giant stone fort had already been there, wouldn't they have just, use that?
So while that debate over Malacca's walls continues, the legacy of these fortifications is being kept alive here on the actual site of Kota Johor Lama, one of those key river forts in that 50-mile chain. A museum has been built in the style of a traditional Malay house, preserving the artifacts and the incredible story of this civilization.
So, from a simple word, Kota, we've uncovered this whole world of engineering, strategy, and philosophy. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other stories are just hiding in plain sight, in the ruins of forgotten forts and lost cities, just waiting for us to understand them?